it's Mo. It is May 5th, and I have not started my April read for the TBR Spin 2025 yet, but let me tell you about the TBR Spin. It is a super fun booktube game where at the beginning of the year you pick 12 books off of your TBR. It can be your physical TBR, could be your digital TBR, could be your audio TBR, could just be books that you want to read. It is a game to try and read down your TBR, so I always pick physical books and I always vlog all my TBR Spin picks. So you can go back for the last 3 years, including this year, and see all the books that I have read for the TBR Spin. The TBR Spin was created by Sarah at Freshly Read Books and Jill at The Book Bully, but Sarah only does the TBR Spin this year in 2025. So we have our 12 books at the beginning of the year. Sarah has a wheel with prompts on it. She spins the wheel a little bit before the end of the month in a live show, and then that wheel has a prompt that leads us to pick a book off of our stack. We read that book, the next month spins the wheel again, we pick another book, and so on and so forth for 12 months of the year to read down 12 books off of our TBR. So the prompts do not repeat, but sometimes there are prompts that cause you to pick a book that's not on your stack, cause you to switch out a stack. Sometimes there are switches built into the spin, but it's a super fun way to each month pick a prompt and pick a book and read a book off of your TBR. I've been behind all year, but last month in April, I almost made it because I did pick my April book in April, and I picked Spy Family Volume 1, which is a manga by Tatsuya Endo, and the prompt for this was a hyped book, a book that past or present you've seen hyped a lot. There's not a lot of hyped books on my TBR Spin list. I would say a couple, but this one I would say out of all of them is the most hyped. The book that I see get the most love on BookTube, especially from booktubers that I really like Criminali and Nerdy Nat Reads. So I'm excited to read this one. I have not read a manga in a very long time, and I haven't read like a true manga that the pages go backwards. For us, obviously not for people in Japan, in a very long time, so I am a little bit intimidated to start this one, but I do know that because it's a graphic novel, it's probably going to go very quickly. Now, I'm going to bring this on my vacation. Like I said, I have not started it yet. I am going away for a few days, for like 5 days, starting the day after tomorrow, so I don't think I'm going to get to start this beforehand, but I definitely want to bring it with me because I think this is the perfect book to bring on a trip where I might have a lot to do, but I might be able to dip in and out. It's small, it's light, it is a book that I could probably read a couple pages of and stop, read a couple of pages and stop, instead of getting like super engrossed in a story. Or if I have like a free hour or hour and a half, maybe I can just breeze through this whole thing. So I wanted to come on here because I don't think I'm going to get to film a lot during this trip. I do plan on filming like a little vlog if I can, but it'll probably be mostly images. And I don't know if I'm going to get to talk about this on the halfway mark, both because it's a short manga and because I'm going to be on this trip. So I wanted to come on here and say that I am planning on starting this soon. I'm excited to do so. Spy Family is about a family of spies. Specifically, the husband of this family, the father of this family, is a spy on a mission, and he has to gather his family around to look like a family man for this mission. And it turns out that everyone that he gathers around has their own ulterior motives and has their own skill set going into it. Now, I don't know too much about it. I do know that he has like a daughter who's psychic, or maybe has some sort of psychic power. I think his wife is an assassin. So I'm super interested. It sounds super fun, but also like very wholesome. I mean, I'm sure there's death and murder and stuff, but like also very wholesome family, found family vibes. But I thought something that we could do was talk about my history with comics and manga. So manga is something that I got into in the 90s. I think a lot of people did. I think Ghost in the Shell was coming out. We were seeing a lot of influx of Japanese cartoons and comics. For a long time, I actually wanted to go to college, and I mean, I went to college, but go to college specifically for like international affairs, or like, I don't know what you would call that, like sociology of international back and forth. And I wanted to do a thesis on the impact of World War II on media between America and Japan. So anyway, I never did do that, but maybe one day I'll just write it for fun. I really got into manga. I really got into anime specifically. I was always a comics person. One of my earliest memories ever is of going to the library with my mother and getting comics. I got a Conan comic and some other comics and reading comics and being too young for them, like not quite understanding what was going on, but really loving comics. My dad liked comics. I remember specifically when I was older reading his heavy metal magazines and different comics that he had around. I've always really loved comics. I like manga, but I think traditional comics are more my thing. So I wanted to talk about a few comics that probably like really changed me as a person. These are not in any particular order, but these are comics that really influenced my artist style, my reading style, my writing style, comics that I love. And one of those is Tank Girl. I remember when I was a teenager, I loved the magazine Details. It was a men's magazine similar to GQ, but like much more hip, much more like on the younger side of fashion and political magazines, and it had a lot of interviews with people that I loved. I was obsessed with X-Files. I was obsessed with fashion, so I loved seeing the men's fashion in there. And in the back of those magazines, they had one-page comics a lot of times, and sometimes they were Tank Girl comics. That led me to seek out the books, and I just love Tank Girl. I love the style of artwork. I love the sassiness of it, the violence. I think this really changed like what I thought of traditional comics, but also like this to me was like indie comics in a nutshell, right? Like this just was so revolutionary to me. It also like the feminist aspect of it, the love story within it, the idea of like queerness and loving people who don't look like you. All those things really caught my attention and I fell in love with Tank Girl. I did like the movie too. The movie came out like later in the 90s. I had already been reading Tank Girl before the movie came out. And the movie isn't exactly the comics, but it's not a horrible version of the comics. Tank Girl was a big influence for me. Something that I know about myself and comics is that I have to like the artwork. If I don't like the artwork, I can't read the comic. It doesn't matter how good the comic is. It doesn't matter how much I want to read it, but if I can't get into the art style, I can't read the comic. And I think that that's actually a reason that I don't read more manga, because manga is usually so similar. Like obviously every artist has their own style, but manga itself has a very specific aesthetic. So it ends up being that a lot of the illustrations look similar. And again, that's no diss to the artists or anything like that. They're not all the same, obviously, but I think I have to really enjoy the artwork to be able to get into a manga or a comic or anything. And that leads me to one of the other comics that kind of made me as a person, and specifically because of the art style, Kabuki by David Mack. Did I say that Tank Girl is written by Jamie Hewitt and Alan Martin? Written and drawn by Jamie Hewitt and Alan Martin. So Kabuki by David Mack, I was really fangirled out about David Mack, and I loved, again, the sexiness, the violence. I really liked the black and white style because that was something that a lot of art styles I didn't like at the time in black and white. So to me, this was a pretty revolutionary comic in general. And then later in the Kabuki history, there is a lot more color because David Mack is a watercolor artist, and even now David Mack is still working, but he doesn't necessarily write his own comics or draw his own comics, but he does a lot of work on covers of other people's comics. So yeah, I just thought Kabuki was really beautiful. I should probably tell you what these are about. So Tank Girl is about a post-apocalyptic future where water is a huge commodity and where everyone has to kind of scavenge for everything, and Tank Girl is such a scavenger, a bounty hunter, a lone wolf person who is just trying to survive in this post-apocalyptic landscape. The different people that she encounters and the mythos kind of around this new world and Tank Girl. Kabuki is about a group of assassins and how they all came together, and specifically follows the assassin Kabuki and her backstory and how she becomes independent of this assassin's guild or creed or creation where she has been honed to be a killer. So throughout the Kabuki books, you kind of see her coming into her own person, learning her mythos. So like similar themes to Tank Girl in some ways, falling in love as well later in the books. When I was a teenager, I thought it was amazing that this white man had a Japanese girlfriend, had gone to Japan. That was like a dream of mine. I thought it was perfectly normal that he was writing this story of like Japanese culture and about a Japanese woman. Now looking back on it, maybe it's a little shady, like maybe it definitely is cultural appropriation, and maybe his fetish for Japanese people and Japanese women is a little odd. So I haven't reread this one in a long time, but like maybe it would be worth it to reread it and see how I feel about those themes, knowing what I know now. Another art style that I love and that I fangirled out about is Mike Mignola and Hellboy. I love Hellboy. I think Hellboy is a good jumping off point to get into comics if you like horror, because you'll see a lot of themes of horror in his work. There's a lot of reference to different horror books. There's, oh, I love this part. There's just so many horror themes. And as the books go on and as we learn more about Hellboy's character, we see different mythos from different cultures come in and different horror elements come from different cultures, and it's really, really fascinating. The first story, Seed of Destruction, we meet Hellboy, who is working for a paranormal detective agency, and he is a Hellboy. We see his origin story, but basically he is a boy from hell who was summoned, but his adopted father takes care of him and raises him to be a good person. But the struggle between good and evil, the struggle between morality and selfishness and all of that stuff is a big common theme in Hellboy's stories. Hellboy fights for right, but he definitely has struggles within him. This was not a good movie. None of the movies that I've seen of Hellboy were good movies, but the first one, Guillermo del Toro one, is probably the closest and the best, although I don't like any depiction of Hellboy. I think everyone gets his character wrong. Another really influential one with me, which I couldn't find the first graphic novel in, but one that I absolutely loved, was Madman by Mike Allred. Madman is kind of a Wade Wilson, pre-Wade Wilson character in that he was killed, dead, destroyed, and came back to life. He kind of lost his memories for a time. There's some scientists, there's some love interests, there's some people around, and he goes from being kind of an anti-hero or a confused hero to being a true hero, and he even gains, friends, teammates. He ends up being part of X-Force or Ecstatic for a little while. These later books where he has those teams are not as interesting to me as the original story, where you're kind of learning his origin and seeing his struggle again with humanity and with being who he is and trying to reconcile that with what other people think of him. Very similar to Hellboy, so you can see a lot of common themes. Another comic book that I really love is Batman the Long Halloween. I am partial to Batman in general. This is a great comic to start with, I think. It's very simple, it's very simply drawn and simply written. It was written by Jeff Loeb and drawn by Tim Sale, and it is very cinematic in its depiction of the story. So I think this is a really good, traditional style comic to get into as a new person to comics. It tells a story that you kind of know. Who doesn't kind of know the story of Batman? And although this is not his origin story, almost every Batman comic has a little bit of that in it. And it has some familiar characters that you would know, like Catwoman and Scarecrow and the Joker. And this story, The Long Halloween, is about a long Halloween, a year of Halloween, a year starting on Halloween where Batman has to figure out all these different murders and deal with the villains in Gotham City and the criminals in Gotham City, the mob, use his allies and various different people to figure out and try to stop this long Halloween. So this is one of my all-time favorite comics. I reread this one pretty frequently because it's so beautiful and it's so easy to read. I mean, it's just really stunningly drawn. I think it's a great like standalone, but there is also a sequel called Dark Victory, which is also really good. Where I think you should absolutely start with Batman is Batman Year One, and this one is his origin story, and it has just amazing art style. It's very easy to follow. It's very easy to get the hang of reading how the comic should be read and not getting confused into where word bubbles are. I find that many people who have a hard time reading comics have a hard time figuring out how to read across the page, which is interesting that now manga is so popular because you read differently across the page than in other comics. I would definitely suggest starting with Year One, Batman Year One, if you're into superhero things. If you like that superhero story, but a superhero story that has very solid grounding in just personal stories, I think Batman Year One is great. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Umbrella Academy. So this is Apocalypse Suite, which is the first Umbrella Academy, and again, I just love the artwork in this. It's a little bit more quirky, but it's a really fun, and this is not an easy story to get into because it does have a lot to do with time travel and going back and forth in time, but because it's a popular series now on Netflix, which I did enjoy all of them except the last season. The last season was not good, but all the other ones are really good. It might be one that's worth trying if you like that series, again, because you will know the story. They follow very closely the story of the books, and then you will be able to get the hang of reading comics. So I love The Umbrella Academy. And then the last graphic novel that I'm going to talk about today, I have many more that I could talk about. I could go on and on. I have many more favorites. We could do a whole series of like queer comics and all different things. Let's talk about Watchmen, because Watchmen for a long time was considered like the greatest comic ever and the comic to kind of beat all comics. And a lot of people, I think, tried to read Watchmen as their first comic. This is not a good comic to read as your first comic. Watchmen is by Alan Moore and Dave Gibson, and The Umbrella Academy is by Gerald Way and Gabriel Ba. Watchmen is a commentary and a satire about other superhero comics, so it's a book that you need to have a foundation of superhero comics in to fully grasp. Many people now have that because of movies and because of TV shows, but it's a very convoluted comic to read as a beginner. There's absolutely gorgeous artwork in here. This is a book that I didn't like the artwork when I first read it. I found the colors to be very jarring, but now that I'm more accustomed to things, I find it to be very, very beautiful, and I do really enjoy all the artwork, and I do love the story. Not only do you have to have a base of comics for this one, but because it is pretty epic, I think it's important to, be in for the long haul. Like a lot of these other comics are a little bit less complicated, less intellectual, even though they have maybe complicated themes, or maybe they have, different aspects of intrigue and such. But like Watchmen, I think you really kind of need a little bit of brain power behind it, which is not hard. We're all readers, but you have to be in like kind of right headspace for it. I think that the film version is actually better than the comic in that it is clearer and easier to understand. The comic itself is iconic and you can't fully one-on-one compare them, but if you are interested in reading Watchmen, I would definitely suggest reading it and then watching the movie, or watching the movie and then reading it, because I do think they did an amazing job with the film. I think it's one of the best film adaptations of a comic because it is a true adaptation. I think they remove things and change things and made some things stronger and made some things less important so that it is the essence of the comic more accessible. A true adaptation. So those are a bunch of comics that I absolutely love, but I have many, many more. So if you'd like to see another video on more comics or on my take on what are great for beginners, intermediate, or expert level comic readers, definitely let me know. And also, I haven't read comics in a long time, so all of these are definitely on the older side. So if you are currently reading graphic novels and there are some graphic novels that you think would go well with my list, or if you think they would be great for beginners, or if you think they are need to read comics, definitely leave those in the comments below. And when I start reading Spy Family, I will come back to you. I have finished Spy Family Volume 1. I finished this about a week ago while I was in Arizona. It's time to talk about it. I really liked it. It took me a little while to get into. I haven't read a graphic novel in a minute. I haven't read a manga. So in my previous TBR Spin video, I talked about how I might read this before I went on vacation. Well, it wasn't a vacation. It was a trip. I was traveling. It wasn't a fun travel. But anyway, the point is that I did start this while I was there. So I started it one morning and I read a few pages, and that was like kind of dicey. I wasn't sure if I was going to get into it, and then I just chilled out one day. I had a bunch of extra time before I had to fly out, and I sat in a garden in the nice weather in the shade and read the vast majority of this, and then I finished just the last little bit later that day at the airport. I thought it was really fun. There's definitely some weird things about it, like there's definitely some outdated things. I don't know when this was first published. I don't even know if this has like published information. Oh yeah, 2019. I don't know if that is the translated version. This was translated by Casey Lowe, or if that was the original version. I liked the found family aspect of this, which I think is like the majority of this book. I liked the spy aspect. Like I said, there was a couple of like outdated or inappropriate things that happened, but those are like minor things and they might be more like cultural things, and it could have to do with if this was written in like the early 2000s or first published in the early 2000s in Japan. I enjoyed getting to know each character. I enjoyed how their relationship works, and I would definitely read more in this series. Spy Family is about a spy. His name is Twilight, and he is like given his whole personality, his whole life over to his spy company, whatever that is. This is kind of in a Japan or in a world where there are two vying factions of the world, and he is for one, and the other one is always trying to infiltrate him, and he's always trying to infiltrate them. So he puts on disguises, and he kills people, and he injures people, and he steals things, and he recovers things, and he just is, his whole personality basically is being a spy and being the best spy. But we find out in this first book that there are reasons why he became a spy and why he's devoted his life to making what he sees as a better world. It's still unclear in this whether there is like a truly good and evil side, or whether they're just kind of two sides of the same whole, you know, one side thinking they're doing good, the other side thinking they're doing good. Sometimes they're doing bad on both sides. He gets a new assignment, and in this assignment he needs to have a wife and a child, and the company just kind of makes him do this and lets him loose. They don't really give him that much help. He does have kind of a Q type character, if you're familiar with James Bond, who does get him gadgets and helps him find information and things like that, but he has to go to a orphanage and find a child, and unbeknownst to Twilight, our main character, the child is psychic. So she's able to read his mind, and she's able to read other people's minds, and she latches onto him and wants to stay with him. She's uneducated and she's unmannered because she's been through the foster system and through the adoption system for so long. So he struggles to get her into the like high academic level that he needs to get into this private school that he needs to infiltrate. And then sort of a similar thing happens with finding a wife. So he needs to find a wife wife to go along with his daughter. He needs to find a home for them to live in. And this book is all about him doing that and how they all have their own reasons for being together, and they all are kind of using the other for their own means, but how they also have a lot of pretty immediate like respect for each other and stick together through some tough times, like the initiation of getting into this really prestigious academy. It took me a little while to get into, and I did keep doing this thing where, because the pages read the opposite, for some reason when I got to the end, I always wanted to skip to this part of the page. So I'd read the page and then skip to the bottom and be like, what's happening? And I'd have to go back and skip to the top again. I don't know why my eyes were doing that. I don't know why it was happening that way. But once I got into it and once I spent like a solid hour reading, I felt good about it. This would have taken me probably only a couple of hours to read, except that I was elsewhere and except that I was doing other things. And like I said, it took me a little while to get into. So I will definitely keep my eye out for more Spy Family. I won't go out of my way to pick it up. I was intrigued by the end to see if Twilight and his new family are going to kind of discover what they're going to discover about each other, and if they're going to discover why they've all been brought together. So I enjoyed that one. And that was my TBR spin for April. Like I said, I did not get to catch up with April in April. So now it is May 17th and I'm just about ready to pick my new TBR spin book. On my TBR spin list, I have Cain by Jean Toomer, 8 Men by Richard Wright. I just read a book recently that talked more about Richard Wright, and I didn't realize he was writing like in the 40s. I thought he was writing more like in the 70s. So I'm still very intrigued to read this one, but it's a little bit of a like mind shift, mindset shift. 8 Men is a collection of short stories. I have The Turquoise Ledge by Leslie Marmon Silko, which is a memoir. I have How to Pronounce Knife by Sovayankam Thamaganza. I have to figure out how to say it every single time. This is a collection of short stories. The Life of Alado Aquino, which is a slave narrative, so this is an autobiography. Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own by Eddie S. Glaude, which is a nonfiction. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, which is a novel. And then Love by Toni Morrison, which is a stand-in for the next Toni Morrison that I need to read, which is Songs of Solomon. So I will keep this in until I pick a Toni Morrison and just swap it out for whatever Toni Morrison I'm currently reading. I did bring Songs of Solomon when I brought this to Arizona, so I might try to pick that one because I was hoping to read it, but we will have to see what the spin gives us. So I have pulled up Sarah's video, her live stream from the end of April, the beginning of May, to talk about our May book. So let's go ahead and watch that.
Such a dumb reason to want to read one of these books, but I weirdly want to get The Perks of Being a Wallflower because...
Okay, so the spin said, the book with the most unhinged, strange premise. I mean, okay, I have a couple right off the bat that I think might work. Obviously not these three, because they're all to deal with true Black lives to one extent or another. Obviously not the memoir, obviously not the nonfiction, although I would say that you could call the idea of the rise of slavery and the continuation of the oppression of people of color in America a unhinged premise, but we're talking about fiction, I think, in this prompt, not nonfiction. I don't know what the premise of Song of Solomon is, so I think we're going to take that one off, which leaves us with these two. Let me read this little blurb bit about what the different stories are in this short story collection. A former boxer finds a chance at redemption while working at his sister's nail salon. Interesting. A daughter becomes an unwilling accomplice in her mother's growing infatuation with country singer Randy Travis. A school bus driver must grapple with how much he's willing to give up in order to belong. And in the titular story, a young girl's unconditional love for her father transcends the fickleness of language. Those sound pretty tame, actually. I thought this was going to be a little bit more speculative, maybe, or a little bit more obtuse or obscure of concepts. So I think that really does lead us with Louise Erdrich, The Sentence. This is a pandemic novel, and I haven't really read true pandemic novel. I've read some works that kind of touched on the pandemic, but I don't know if I've read a full novel. And this also talks about the death of George Floyd, the murder that occurred in 2020. I think it was 2020. But I know this has ghosts. A small independent bookstore in Minneapolis is haunted by the store's most annoying customer. Tukey, who has landed a job selling books after years of incarceration that she survived by reading with murderous intent, must solve the mystery of this haunting while at the same time trying to understand all that occurs in Minneapolis during the year of grief, astonishment, isolation, and furious reckoning. So yeah, I think that this one probably out of my stack fits the prompt the best because it is speculative and it does have some strange ideas in it, but it kind of fits with what I was saying earlier, which is like the absurdity of the world at the moment, or at the moment as it was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also as it was during that time of, police murdering Black people. And that still happens today, obviously. That didn't change. This probably fits the prompt the best. I think I will read it on audio. I have read one other Louise Erdrich, so I'm interested to read more. I did really enjoy her writing, and I've picked up a ton of her work, so I would like to get to more. So I think this is going to be our pick for May. I'm pretty excited about that. Let me know if you're participating in the TBR Spin. Let me know what you got for May and if you've read it already. I'm going to say this every video for the rest of the year. I could definitely finish this one in May and get back on track. I'm sure that Freshly Read Books is going to do her live show in the next week and a half, probably maybe around Memorial Day, which actually, if she did it on Memorial Day Sunday, that would be perfect because my husband's going away. So I could potentially do reading sprints and really catch up if I'm not already caught up by reading this book. If you haven't joined the party, the TBR Spin Party, I definitely suggest trying it out. It's super fun. And I will see you next time for another vlog. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!